Today we're going to be discussing verse 5 of Ēkāṉma Pañcakam. This is the fifth and last verse. As I explained, the title of this work, Ēkāṉma Pañcakam. Pañcakam means 5 verses, and ēkāṉma is a Tamil form of ēkātma, which means literally it means one self. What is implied by ēkātma is not simply that there is one self, but oneself is the one. There is only one self. There is nothing else. This idea is emphasized by Bhagavan in this final verse. There are basically 2 sentences in this final verse. In the first sentence, Bhagavan says, eppōdum uḷḷadu a-v-v-ēkāṉma vattuvē. Uḷḷadu means what is or what exists. Eppōdum uḷḷadu means what always exists. Always here in the sense of eternally, what exists eternally, what exists permanently without any break, is a-v-v-ēkāṉma vattuvai. Ēkāṉma, as I said, is a Tamil form of ēkātma, and vattu is a Tamil form of vastu, which is again a Sanskrit word. Vastu means the real substance. In some contexts, we can translate it as the reality, but the essential meaning is it's the substance. In the previous verse, Bhagavan used this word when using the analogy of ornaments and gold. That is not in the verse itself, but in the Kalivemba version of the verse, he added the word vattuvām before the first word, which is pon, meaning gold. So what Bhagavan said in the first sentence of the previous verse is, does an ornament exist as different to or other than gold, which is the substance? This is obviously an analogy, this gold and ornament, but just like what actually exists is only in an ornament, what actually exists is only a gold. We may call it, it may appear in the form of a bangle or a necklace or a ring or so many different types of ornaments, but those are only the forms. The actual substance is gold. So whatever form it appears in, the substance remains the same. So what is real is the substance. The form is just a temporary appearance. Like that, the one real substance is our own real nature, what we actually are, which is pure awareness. Everything else are just temporary forms, and they are not even real. They are just mere appearances. So what Bhagavan says here, when he says uḷḷadu, it means what exists, but it implies what actually exists. What actually exists always is ēkāṉma vattuvai. ēkāṉma vastu is a compound term, but it's made of 3 words: eka, which means one, āṉma, which means oneself, and vastu means substance. The implication of ēkāṉma vastu is that oneself is the one real substance. So oneself, the one real substance, is what actually exists. That's what Bhagavan is saying in this sentence. This is very similar to what he says in the first sentence of the 7th paragraph of Nana, in which he says, yatātamai uḷḷadu. Yatātamai means actually, what actually exists. Atma-sarupam andre. Atma-sarupam means the real nature of oneself. So what actually exists is only our own real nature, is what Bhagavan says there. There he says Atma-sarupam andre. Andre is a very emphatic way of saying only. So what actually exists is only our real nature. Everything else is a mere appearance, or as Bhagavan says in the next sentence of that 7th paragraph, he says, Jaga Jiva Ishwaragal, Sipil Velipol Adil Karpanegal. That means the world, soul, and God are Karpane. Karpane, Karpanegal is a plural form of Kalpane, which is a Tamil form of the word Karpana, which means a fabrication, an imagination, or a mental creation. So everything else is just a mental creation. What actually exists is only our own real nature, is what Bhagavan says there. And he says essentially the same thing here. But after vastu, he adds a suffix a, which is acts as an intensifier in Tamil, and in this context it implies only. In that sentence in the 7th paragraph of Nana, he said explicitly only our own real nature is what actually exists is only our own real nature. He said it very explicitly there. He said it slightly less explicitly, but by strongly implied it here by adding that a. A can mean only, it can also mean definitely. So what always exists is definitely and only that ēkāṉma vastu. That ēkāṉma vastu is implies our real nature, which is the one real substance. Then in the next sentence, he says, eppōdu, ādi-guru. Well, the first clause, I'll read the first clause first. Eppōdu, ādi-guru, a-v-vattuvai, seppādu, seppi, teriyumā, seydaṉarēl. What that means is, if at that time implies in ancient times, the ādi-guru, the ādi-guru means the original guru, that refers to Dakshinamurti. Seppādu, seppi means saying without saying or speaking without speaking. So seppādu, seppi, teriyumā, seydaṉarēl means if made that vastu known by speaking without speaking. So the meaning of this first clause is, if at that time the ādi-guru made that vastu known, speaking without speaking, that implies only by speaking without speaking, evar seppi terivippar, who can make it known speaking? That implies by speaking. And he ends with an imperative seppu, which means say. So the whole sentence means, if at that time the ādi-guru made that vastu known only by saying without saying, say, who can make it known by saying? In other words, what Bhagavan implies here is, when even Dakshinamurti was able to make that reality, that true substance, that real substance, known only by silence, speaking without speaking is a metaphorical way of saying, conveying the truth without words. In other words, through silence. If he was able to make it known only by speaking without speaking, who can make it known by speaking? In other words, ultimately the truth, but whatever words may be used, for instance, Bhagavan has conveyed his teaching through words in the form of works like this, Ēkāṉma Pañcakam, uḷḷadu, Padacchēdam, Arunachal Pañcakam, and Nana. Through these works, Bhagavan, and by answering so many questions that people ask, Bhagavan conveyed his teachings in words. But whatever may be expressed in words cannot adequately convey the truth. We cannot actually experience what we are by means of words. Our real nature, which is pure awareness, is absolute silence. So our real nature can be revealed or made known only through silence. That's why Bhagavan often used to say, the real teaching is not the word, the real teaching is silence. It is the silence that gives us inner clarity to understand what these words are pointing at. That is, whatever words Bhagavan has used are to direct our attention back towards ourselves, to turn our mind within. When we turn our attention back towards ourselves, the nature of ego is to rise by attending things other than itself and to subside when it attends to itself. So the more we attend to ourselves, the more we as ego subside. The more we subside, the more we return to our natural state of perfect silence. In the 6th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan defines what silence and our real nature is. He says, Nan enam ninevu kinjitum ila idame surupamahum. That literally means the place Bhagavan's using here in a metaphorical sense to mean the state, the place which is devoid of even the slightest trace of the thought called I, is sarupam, is our real nature. a-v-v-ēkāṉma eppōdum. That alone is called mona. So what Bhagavan implies in these two sentences is that mona is our real nature. Why is mona our real nature? Because it is the state in which the thought called I, nanenam ninevu, which means ego, in which the state in which ego doesn't rise even to a slightest extent, that is our real nature, and that is mona. So it is only when we as ego subside back into our source, back into our real nature, back into the place from which we've risen, that we can experience our natural state of perfect silence. And only in that natural state will our real nature be revealed. And because our real nature is that silence. So when Bhagavan talks about silence, he's not just talking about verbal silence. He's not even talking about mental silence. He's talking about the silence that is beyond mind, because mental silence is possible only if there's a mind. Mind is just is ego. So we have to rise as ego in order to experience mental silence. So it's a relative. Mental silence is a relative silence. The silence in which there's not even the slightest room for the rising of any ego, that is absolute silence. That is the silence Bhagavan refers to when he says the true teachings are only silence. And that is what he refers to here as speaking without speaking. Because our real nature is not only absolute silence, it's also the perfect clarity of pure awareness. So it's ever revealing itself without speaking. So it's ever speaking without speaking, to put it in the metaphorical terms in which Bhagavan uses here. As I had explained earlier about this Ēkāṉma Pañcakam, Bhagavan composed this work in Vemba-meter. And as he did with most of the works he composed in Vemba-meter, he joined them all together into a single verse called a Kali Vemba. And to join a series of Vembas into a Kali Vemba, you have to add an extra 1.5 foot at the end of each line to link it to the next verse. So when Bhagavan converted this into a Kali Vemba, before the first sentence, he added the words Tanadoliyal, that's Tanadu Oliyal, which means by its own light. So with these additional words, the first sentence means what always exists what always exists by its own light is that Ēkāṇma Vastu. By its own light means by its own, implying its own light of awareness. And he also changed the final word, seppu, which is an imperative meaning say, to seppuha, which is an optative or a more polite imperative meaning may, implying may you say. So with these extensions, what this verse means is, what always exists by its own light is only that ēkāṉma vastu. If at that time the ādi-guru made that vastu known by speaking without speaking, may you say, who can make it known by speaking? So what Bhagavan is, the two things Bhagavan is teaching us in this verse. One is, but what actually exists, what always exists, and what exists by its own light is only our own real nature, which is the one real substance. That's the first point he made. The second point is that this can be revealed only by silence. He doesn't refer explicitly to silence, but by implication he refers to silence by saying, if at that time the ādi-guru made that vastu known by speaking without speaking, may you say, who can make it known by speaking? So Bhagavan is emphasizing here his real teachings are, the truth can only be conveyed by silence, and that his real teachings are silent. This is quite significant that he wrote this here because Ēkāṉma Pañcakam was the last work Bhagavan composed. He composed, I think, in 1947 or 48, I can't remember exactly. And so this was possibly the last one, or one of the last verses that Bhagavan ever composed. So in this final verse, after giving so much teaching through words, Bhagavan finally said, even Dakshinamurti couldn't convey it through words. He could convey it only by silence. And once when Bhagavan was discussing this, Bhagavan revealed something that hasn't been revealed anywhere else. That is, Bhagavan told the story of Dakshinamurti, but he told it in a way in which it's not found in any books. What Bhagavan said is, but when the four Sanakadi rishis, the Sanakadi rishis were the Manasaputra, the mind-created sons of Brahma, and Brahma had created them thinking that they could help him with his work of creation, but they were not interested in creation. They wanted to know the truth. So they left and went in search of a guru in order to know what is the truth behind all this appearance. And eventually, they, seeing their earnestness, Lord Shiva appeared as a 16-year-old boy seated under a banyan tree. That 16-year-old boy was Dakshinamurti, who was the original guru, the ādi-guru, as Bhagavan describes him here, the guru of all gurus. And what is generally said in books is that Dakshinamurti was sitting there in silence, and the four Sanakadi rishis came and sat at his feet, and then through his silence they understood the truth. But Bhagavan told the story in a slightly different way. He said when they came, they started asking questions. And Dakshinamurti, though he was a very young boy, he felt fatherly love for these elderly men who came to him, who've been searching all their life for the truth. And he, out of compassion, he started to reply to their questions. And whatever answer he gave, they asked further questions, but very, very apt questions. So in this way, this questions and answers, it went on for a full year. And every question was deeper than the previous one. So Dakshinamurti had to give a deeper answer. And to the deeper answer, they would then ask a deeper question. So he was very pleased with the aptness of the questions they were asking. Because it's very important when we approach a guru, we can see from Bhagavan's life, for example, the type of teachings he gave, the level of teachings he gave depended on on who was asking the questions and what type of questions they were asked. So for example, Nana, which Bhagavan gave to Shiv Prakash Pillai, is such a useful work because Shiv Prakash Pillai was such an apt disciple for Bhagavan. The very first question he asked Bhagavan was, Swami, who am I? he had no idea, but Bhagavan had appeared on in this world just to teach this path of self-investigation, to teach it with a fresh clarity, and but had not been, I mean, in a way that is clearer and fresher than has ever been taught in any of the ancient texts. So he asked the most apt question, and all his subsequent questions were likewise very apt. So because of the because he was a fit disciple for the guru, and he asked appropriate questions, he got such useful teachings. Likewise, many of the other most useful teachings that Bhagavan gave, such as uḷḷadu, Bhagavan gave in reply to Murughana, who was likewise a very apt disciple and asked very apt questions. For example, the basic question that Murughana asked, in reply to which Bhagavan wrote uḷḷadu, was Meyin ilbum ādi-guru. That is eppōdu. That means so that we may be saved, reveal to us the nature of reality and the means of attaining it. That is an extremely suitable question to ask Bhagavan, because whereas others came to Bhagavan and asked questions like, Bhagavan, I'm doing japa, is it good? Bhagavan would say, yes, it's good. So according to the type of questions that Bhagavan was asked, he gave answers that were suited to the question. But Murughana basically, in asking this question, Bhagavan a blank slate, he's just saying, what have you come to, I mean, by implication, he's saying, what is it that you've come to teach us? What is the nature of reality? What are the means of attaining it? Obviously, that's what Bhagavan has come to reveal. So without asking anything more, he simply said, what is revealed to us the nature of reality and the means of attaining it? And in answer to that, Bhagavan wrote uḷḷadu. So the answers that are given are always appropriate to the questions that are asked. So in the case of this story that Bhagavan was telling of the Sanakadi Rishis and Dakshinamurti, they were asking the most apt questions, and Dakshinamurti was giving the suitable answers. And according to the answer that Dakshinamurti gave, they would ask a follow-on question which was suitable. So it was following the conversation was following a systematic and logical progression. So for a year, Dakshinamurti went on answering their questions. But however deep their questions were and however deep their answers were, still more questions were rising in their mind. Then Dakshinamurti understood that however long he tries to continue answering their questions by words, he will not be able to dispel their ignorance. So he had to suppress, Bhagavan described it, he suppressed that valve of compassion, that spring of compassion was welling up in his heart. He had to close that spring, close the valve, and he merged back into silence. And as soon as Dakshinamurti merged into silence, they all merged into silence with him. So it was, after answering all their questions, it was ultimately only through silence that he could reveal the ultimate truth. So when Bhagavan once told this story, Murughana said, but Bhagavan, this story is not told like this in any other place. In no books is it written like this. Bhagavan said, no, it's not written like this anywhere, but this is what actually happened. Because Bhagavan is Dakshinamurti himself, he's able to say what actually happened then. So that is, it's to that Bhagavan is alluding in this verse when he says, if at that time the ādi-guru made that real substance known only by speaking without speaking, who can make it known by speaking? So this final verse, ēkāṉma Pañcakam, is a very, very deep and significant verse. since this was after Bhagavan composed these 5 verses, Murugan composed a verse in Tamil as a concluding verse, and what he says in the concluding verse is ēkāṉma innatu enatectri. That means making clear but the truth of ēkāṉma vastu is such. I'll read the whole. ēkāṉma innatu enatectri anba dehāṇma bāvam siddhe-vitān ēkāṉma jnana surupamā nannum guru ramanan tan navindra Pañcakam. What that means is making clear in these 5 verses that he sang that that ēkāṇma, that means the reality which is oneself, the one, is such. Guru Ramana, who exists as ēkāṇma jnana surupa, that means the nature of self-awareness, which is the one reality, has thereby destroyed the dehātma bhava. Dehātma bhava means the conviction that oneself is the body, or that the body is oneself, of his devotees. When Murugan composed this verse for ēkāṉma Pañcakam, but when Bhagavan joined all the verses together as a single Kalivemba, he linked this verse to the other ones, and he adapted this verse. Instead of saying whereas in the original verse it was he had ended it with Pañcakatu, which means in these 5 verses, Bhagavan ended it as ipavitran, and at the beginning he added the words ena eppōdu of that is in the previous verse Bhagavan said about Dakshinamurti, if at that time the ādi-guru could make this known only by speaking without speaking. So here by adding in ena eppōdu of, that means in this time, the implication is at this time, Guru Ramana has revealed it through this work. So the whole of the meaning of the final verse, as adapted by Bhagavan for the Kalivemba verse, is thus at this time making clear in this single Kalivemba verse that he sang that ēkāṇma is such. Guru Ramana, who exists as ēkāṇma jnana swarupa, has destroyed the dehātma bhava of his devotees. That is the conclusion of this of ēkāṇma Pañcakam. So if anyone would like to ask any questions, either about this or about any other aspect of Bhagavan teachings, you can raise your hands as I explained earlier.
Before I start the question, I just would like to thank you very much, Michael, for your clarity that I've been seeing on your channel about Bhagavan's texts. Thank you very much for that. Regarding this, I was wondering, this term that Bhagavan uses here as ādi-guru, is this what you sometimes refer as grace in your talks, or is something completely different?
No, it's certainly not completely different. Grace is the very nature of guru. When about the term ādi-guru, ādi simply means original. Okay. But actually there is only one guru. But when we look outward, we see multiplicity. And it seems to us that there are many gurus. There was Dakshinamurti, who taught in silence. There was Krishna, who taught the Gita to Arjuna. There was Buddha, there was Jesus, there was so many. It appears that there were so many gurus, but actually guru is only one. Because according to Bhagavan, as Bhagavan says in the, at the beginning of the 12th paragraph of Nana, Kadavalam Guruvum Unmayil Veralla. That means God and Guru are in truth not different. So since God is one, Guru is one. And Bhagavan often used to say, God, Guru, and Atma, that's oneself, are all one and the same thing. That is, God or Guru is nothing but our own real nature. So because we mistake ourselves to be a person, Guru appears to us, it's necessary for Guru to appear in the form of a person. Bhagavan sometimes used the analogy, it's like using a tame deer as a decoy to catch a wild deer. So because we mistake ourselves to be a person, it's necessary for Guru to appear in the form of a person, another human being, to tell us, to give us teaching through words. The teaching through words are just the starting point, because ultimately, as Bhagavan implies in this verse, the ultimate teachings are only through silence. But in order to listen to the silent teachings, we need to turn within. So we need those the words to turn us back within. So Guru, though Guru appears outwardly in human form, like for us, Guru appeared in the form of Bhagavan. But what Guru actually is nothing but our own real nature. So it's our own real nature that has appeared outwardly in the form of Bhagavan in order to turn us within. Why does our own real nature appear outwardly? Because our real nature is infinite love. Because love, in the view of our real nature, nothing other than itself exists. That is, we alone are. And self-love is the very nature of ourself. So it's our nature to love ourselves. So our real nature, since our real nature doesn't see anything as other than itself, it loves us as itself. And its love for us as itself is what manifests in our view as grace. So that it's by its grace, by its infinite love for us, that it appears outwardly in human form in order to tell us to turn back within. So yes, it's all grace. Bhagavan often used to say, grace is the beginning, the middle, and the end. It is grace that has manifested in the form of Bhagavan. It is grace that attracted us to Bhagavan. It is grace that attracted us to his teachings. It's grace that draws us to try to put his teachings into practice. And it's grace that gives us the strength to persevere. And finally, it is grace that will swallow us. So yes, everything is grace, from the beginning to the end. To tell the truth, there is only grace, nothing else. Because grace is not other, grace is our real nature. Grace is God, grace is Guru. Does that adequately answer your question?
Yes, it does. I have a second one, if I can, or
yes, certainly.
About this silence that is described in this verse. I can only, because quite often you say the ultimate sound, there's no coming back to mind. So that's not, so that's the one that you are talking about here. If I have some kind of certainty about something, and I come again to a video to my misunderstanding of who I am, so definitely it's not a silence that is being spoken here.
In the absolute silence, Bhagavan described it in one verse in Ēkāṉma as pokum varavumil poduveli, that is the open, empty space in which there's no coming and going. So that silence is eternal. Neither it comes nor it goes. It is what is permanently there. It is what Bhagavan sometimes described as the screen, the background on which what we are aware of as I am, without any adjuncts, that is silence. When adjuncts are when we rise as ego and mistake adjuncts to be ourself, it seems to be covered. But just like even when pictures are projected on the screen may appear to be covered by the pictures because we take more interest in the pictures than the screen, but actually the screen is always visible. We're never looking at anything other than the screen. Likewise, what we are aware of at all times is only silence. But because we as having risen as ego, we projected all these pictures on the screen of silence. We find these pictures more interesting than our real nature. And so we say, oh, I don't know myself. Actually, we know nothing other than ourselves. But it seems that we don't know ourselves as we actually are because we're interested in all this, projection, this dream that we have projected. Does that answer that question adequately?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Michael.
So people say, I was meditating, I experienced silence for 20 minutes. The silence you experience for 20 minutes is not the real silence that Bhagavan is talking about. Because any silence that comes and goes is a part of the ego's projection. It may be, I'm not saying that it's useless, it may be useful sometimes to be in a state of deep quietness, but that is not the silence that Bhagavan is talking about. The silence that Bhagavan is talking about is not mere temporary silencing of mental chatter. It is the eternal silence that transcends the mind, but is not even affected by the appearance or disappearance of the mind or anything else. Just like the screen is not affected, Bhagavan often used to say, a picture of a forest fire may be projected on the screen, but the screen is not burned. A picture of a flood may be projected, but the screen doesn't become wet. So likewise, the silence is never affected by the appearance of, by whatever may appear, because all that appears only in the view of ourself as ego. And if we investigate this ego, we'll find there's no such thing, and we'll find that silence alone always exists. There's never anything other than that. So, Hanuman, would you like to ask now?
There is the self, which is unbounded, unmanifest, and within and without, the feeling of a self. And then we have the personal, let's say, touch or the personal feeling of Sri Ramana. And this is very personal and still is the same. So in order to dive deeply, and I will ask this about this feeling of Ramana himself as a flavor, a scent to be used into diving into the self. It's more of the, I guess, the devotional part. So that is my question, if you could give some light on this topic.
Yes. There is only one self-awareness. That is what we are always experiencing as I am. That is our fundamental awareness of our own existence. That is the real nature of Bhagavan. That is our real nature. Because we are looking outwards, as I explained earlier, Bhagavan appeared outwardly in human form. So Bhagavan appears to us to be a person. But Bhagavan is so much more than a person. Bhagavan is our own real nature. Bhagavan is what is eternally shining in our heart as I. Bhagavan's grace is never lacking because he's always making himself available to us by shining in our heart as eye. What is lacking is our love for him. Because our love for him is insufficient, we are enamored with this outside world, this appearance, this dream. And so most of the time our attention is going outwards, away from him. If to the extent that we truly love him, to that extent we will turn our attention back within to face him alone, because as I say, he's always shining in our heart as eye. So attending only to eye, that is true love for Bhagavan. In fact, Bhagavan's path is the deepest path of devotion. People think, oh, some people are under the wrong impression, oh, Bhagavan just taught jnana marga. It's the path of jnana, path of knowledge. It's a very dry path. There's no devotion in it. But this is actually the true path of devotion, because if you truly love someone, what is it you, in a loving relationship, is not about what we get from the person we love, it's about what we give to the person we love. And the greatest gift is to give ourselves. So giving ourselves, that is self-surrender, is the true path of devotion. All other forms of devotion ultimately lead to self-surrender. But our self-surrender cannot be complete without self-investigation, because the self that we need to surrender is ego. And the nature of ego is to, as Bhagavan says in verse 25 of uḷḷadu, urupatri undam, grasping form, it comes into existence. Urupatri nikam, grasping form, it stands. Urupatri undu mika ongam, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes. Uruvittu urupatram, leaving one form, it grasps another form. Tedinal ottum pidicum, if sought, it takes flight. Uruvatra peya hande, such is the nature of this formless phantom ego. So the nature of ego is to rise by grasping things other than itself. But if it seeks itself, if it turns back within, it takes flight, it subsides and disappears. So if we want to surrender ourselves completely, we can do so only by turning our attention back towards ourselves. Because just like if you see a rope and mistake it to be a snake, you can take a stick and beat the snake, but you're not going to be able to kill it. There's only one way of killing the snake. Look at it very carefully, and you'll see that it's just a rope. It never was a snake. That's the only effective way. However much you beat it with a stick, you're not going to kill it. Likewise with ego. Whatever yoga or meditation or anything else we do, we cannot get rid of ego. The only way to get rid of ego is to investigate it. In other words, to turn and look at it very carefully. Because when we look at it very carefully, we'll see what we actually are, which is pure awareness. And then we'll see there never was any ego. Just like if we look at the snake carefully enough, we'll see it's just a rope, there never was any snake. So if we want to truly give ourselves to God, if we want to truly give ourselves to Bhagavan, turning our attention back within is the way to do so. That is why Bhagavan started in Nana, there's a paragraph that he devoted entirely to self-surrender, and he begins that paragraph by defining what is real self-surrender. What he says is, āṇma chintane tabira, vera chintane kalambavadaku, satram idam kodamo. That means without giving even the slightest room to the rising of any other thought except Atma-chintana. Atma-chintana literally means the thought of oneself, but in effect it means self-attentiveness. So without giving room to the slightest room to rising any thought other than thought of oneself, other than Atma-chintana, other than self-attentiveness, Atmanishta paranai irupte, being as one who is thereby firmly established in oneself, that alone, tanne isanaku alipadam, that alone is giving oneself to God. So if we really love God, if we really want to surrender ourselves to God, we need to turn our attention back within. And by turning our attention back within, we are turning our attention back towards Bhagavan himself, because what is actually shining in us as I, behind this veil of ego, what is shining is only Bhagavan, as I am. So this is the truest and deepest path of devotion that Bhagavan has taught us. Bhagavan's nature is love, and the path he has taught us is a path of love, because only love can lead us to love. Does that adequately answer your question?
Michael, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh.
And I listen it to the YouTube another time. Bring it to my heart. It's a practice. Thank you, thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
All thanks are due only to Bhagavan, because I'm just reiterating what Bhagavan taught us. This isn't anything of mine, this is only what Bhagavan taught us. Katie, did you want to ask a question?
It was just a question on it's similar to the initial question that someone asked. The mental silence is different from absolute silence. I would understand that as the silence of deep sleep, but you've gone on to say that this silence does not come and go, which deep sleep silence does. So maybe you could explain that.
Actually, the silence of deep sleep is that silence. Why sleep seems to come and go, it's just like the moon in the sky, which is not moving, seems to move because of when the clouds are being blown past the moon, it looks like the moon is rushing in the sky. Likewise, our real nature seems to come and go. That is the silence that is our real nature, seems to come in sleep and go when we wake up. But actually it is there, it is the screen. Sleep is the state in which there are no pictures projected on the screen. And waking and dream are states in which pictures are projected. But whether pictures are projected or not, the screen is always there. Likewise, sleep is always there. It's always in the background. Whether waking and dream appear or not. So sleep seems to us to be a temporary state, but that's only from perspective of ourself as ego in waking and dream. Actually, sleep is our eternal state, according to Bhagavan.
So the silence is like waking sleep.
Yes, it is. Sometimes that state of absolute silence is described as waking sleep, because it is the state in which we are awake to our real nature and asleep to everything else.
Yeah.
But that is actually no different to the ordinary sleep that we experience every day. But the ordinary sleep seems to us to be defective. The only defect in the ordinary sleep is that we come out of it. And having come out of it, we cannot recollect it perfectly. We know we existed in sleep, but what we experienced in sleep, we cannot now remember. Because if we could remember it now, what we experienced in deep sleep was pure awareness, which is our real nature. If we could recollect that now, we would be in that state already. So we need now in the waking or dream state, we need to try to experience the silence that we experienced in sleep. So we need to withdraw our attention from everything else and focus our attention solely on ourselves. At first, we are not able to withdraw our attention completely from all other things, so we are not able to go deep enough. But by practicing more and more, we go deeper and deeper into our own real nature. I mean, it's difficult because we are talking about the interface between the absolute and the relative. That interface exists from the perspective of the relative, but from the perspective of absolute, obviously it doesn't exist, because in the view of the absolute, there is only absolute. There is no such thing as relative. So we are now talking from the perspective of mind, which is the relative perspective. So it seems that we are going to the absolute, even though the absolute is always here and now.
Yeah, so just the way Ramana knew exactly what had happened with Dakshinamurti,
Yes.
which is a fascinating thing to know. Did he also know what exactly happened between Krishna and Arjuna? Like, did he talk about those things?
Who was it who gave teachings to Arjuna?
Krishna. So Krishna and Ramana are same, right?
Bhagavan is Bhagavan. Bhagavan Krishna is Bhagavan Ramana. There can only be one Bhagavan.
Right. So it's the jnana.
Differences only exist in our view, not in their view.
Okay. So he didn't often talk about the Bhagavad Gita. Is that so?
Bhagavan selected, but yeah, Bhagavan often talked about Bhagavad Gita. He selected 42 verses, which are the essence of Bhagavad Gita, and he translated them into Tamil.
Okay. But the Bhagavad Gita doesn't, like keep focusing on the same point, like who am I, who am I, who am I, the way Bhagavan.
No, because Bhagavad Gita is a text that is designed to, it's got something for everyone, for all different levels of spiritual maturity. The practice of self-investigation as taught by Bhagavan is expressed extremely clearly in 2 verses of Bhagavad Gita. In chapter 6, verses, I think 25 and 26, if I remember correctly. Sane uparamet. That verse and the next verse. Yes, chapter 6, verses 25 and 26. Those 2 verses, Bhagavan also translated into Tamil, by verses 27 and 28 of Bhagavad Gita Sara.
Could you tell us a bit more about Bhagavan's teaching on incarnation, reincarnations and karma, Michael? I know you have touched upon it in a couple of videos on how this impacts.
In the first verse of Ēkāṉma Pañcakam, today we talked about the final verse. In the first verse, Bhagavan says, after forgetting oneself and figuring a body to be oneself and taking innumerable births, finally knowing oneself and being oneself is just like waking up from a dream of wandering about the world. Bhagavan, every life is just a dream.
Can't hear you,
Dreamer,
Michael. Can't hear you.
His ego, as long as the ego exists, the dreaming will continue. When one dream comes to an end, another dream will start. So what is incarnation or rebirth is nothing but one dream after another occurs.
Sorry, the vasanas, the inherent vasanas in us, comes back to haunt us from a reincarnation point of view, as per Ramana Bhagavan's teaching, right? That's what you're alluding to, right, Michael? The vairagyas, the vasanas come back. I mean,
Yes. That is what we take from one life to another, one dream to another. Not only our store of past karmas, but also all our vasanas. And our vasanas are what determine how we act in each. So if in this life we cultivate vairagya by practicing the path of self-investigation and self-surrender, we don't reach the end of our journey in this lifetime, the vairagya and bhakti that we have developed in this lifetime will accompany us.
The question is, in the first verse of the Ēkāṉma Pañcakam, Bhagavan tells us that anyone who mistakes his body for the real self and therefore takes innumerable births is like someone who wanders all over the world in a dream. And it is only when that person eventually realizes the self that he also wakes up from his dream. Now, Bhagavan also taught us that when we realize our real self, we also realize that there are no others. There are no others. There is nothing but God or the self, which we are. On the other hand, he also taught us that until we are realized, we have to deal with our self-projected dream as if it is actually real. And we know that in this dream world, which we ourselves, our egos, have projected or created, some pretty nasty things are now happening, which we urgently need to deal with as if they are real. It could, however, be that in our dream world, God, the self, is revealing to us through this pandemic, the utter folly of the way in which we humans have been living for so long, that our planet simply cannot take much more of the treatment we are inflicting on it. And that in destroying our planet in the way we are also destroying ourselves. For if we carry on in this way, we will soon find that we cannot live on a poisoned planet. We are told that this pandemic started in China, where the virus jumped from bats into the people who were eating them. It is said by some that there will never be peace in the world for so long as we go on treating animals in the way we do, and by others that God or the self did not in any case create animals for human consumption. Moreover, since there is nothing else but the self, it could be that our real self, God, has sent us this pandemic to show us that we cannot go on living in the way we are, or to simply stop our Gadarene rush towards self-destruction. What have you got to say about that, Michael?
Okay, well, a few things. Firstly, you say we urgently need to deal with the things that are actually happening with coronavirus and so on. As Bhagavan taught us, this is all a dream.
Yep.
When you say we need to deal with it, what is it? Certain appropriate actions are necessary for our mind, speech, and body. Mm-hmm. We need to get used to social distancing, so we need to get a new mindset. We need to take more care washing our hands. Various precautions we need to take, but all these precautions are to be taken by whom? They're not to be taken by us. They're to be taken by the mind, speech, and body, which are themselves a part of this dream. So it is in a dream, it's appropriate that we act in accordance with the seeming reality of that dream. That the dream actually isn't real, but we who seem to be acting in that dream world are no more real than the dream world. That is because what is acting is speech and body, which is part of this dream world. So that's one point. That's why often Bhagavan used to say, dream food satisfies dream hunger. I think the reason Bhagavan said that, he said it in many different contexts, but I think the implication of what Bhagavan was saying is we need to act in a dream appropriate to the seeming reality of the dream. and I think the reason that I believe the reason that is, what is acting, as I say, is mind, speech, and body, which are themselves a part of the dream. It is not the mind, speech, and body are not the dreamer. The dreamer is ego. Mind, speech, and body are part of the ego's projection. So they are no more real than anything else in the dream. So that's one point. The other is, yes, this pandemic is there now in this world. We can interpret this in various ways. People who are concerned about the way, as you say, we are destroying this world. We are exhausting all the resources. We are polluting it. We are causing global warming. We're also acting in a way that is very unjust. There's plenty for everyone in this world, but some people have a superabundance, while other people have insufficient to sustain themselves. There's a huge amount of poverty sitting alongside a huge amount of wealth in this world. So there are so many injustices in this world. So we can interpret this pandemic as a wake-up call on so many different levels. But as spiritual aspirants, we need to view it somewhat differently. As spiritual aspirants, we need to take it. These are challenging times for all of us. For many of us may be very worried about what is happening. We may be worried about our health, the health of our parents, our grandparents, or the elderly people. We may be worried about our job. We may be worried about the economy. There's so many causes we now have for worry. But if we are following the path of surrender, what Bhagavan has taught us, we need to. We can take this as an opportunity, a good opportunity for us to put surrender into practice. That is, we need to all our concerns, all our worries. We need to understand Bhagavan is taking care of all these things. There's no need for us to worry about anything, because as Bhagavan wrote, for example, in the note to his mother, what is never going to happen is not going to happen, however much effort we make, and what is going to happen is not going to stop, however much obstruction is made. So Bhagavan says, ādi-guru, this is certain. So whatever is to be will be. We cannot change anything. So there's no use in our worrying about these things. We need to leave all concern about these things to Bhagavan. We need to follow the path that he has shown us, which is the path of surrender. And we can surrender most effectively by turning our attention within. The world, what is going to happen in this world is going to happen. We cannot, those who are destined to die will die. We're all going to die one day, sooner or later. We just don't know whether it's 10, 20 years hence, or whether it's the next minute. Perhaps this one spiritual benefit of this coronavirus, it reminds us of how fleeting and uncertain our lives are. When everything seems to be going well in our life, when we're in good health, when the world seems to be going on, at least from our perspective, in an okay way, we easily become complacent and we forget that death could come at any minute. Remembering the ever-present imminence of death is very good for us on the spiritual path, because a lot of the efforts we make in this world, acquiring wealth and planning for our future, planning for our retirement, all these things, they're all based on the assumption that death is somehow far away. But we can never be sure how far away death is. It may come the next minute. We may have a heart attack. We may get coronavirus. We may step out in the road and be hit by a bus. Life is never certain. We delude ourselves when we think that our life is somehow certain, but we're somehow guaranteed to live longer. So all these things, from a spiritual point of view, we can take this, what is happening now, as a reminder of our mortality, a reminder of fleeting and uncertain nature of life, and a reminder of the importance of self-surrender. We need to surrender all our burdens to Bhagavan. Bhagavan asked us to, said like, Bhagavan used the beautiful analogy of a passenger traveling on the train. If we're traveling on the train, we don't need to carry our luggage on our head, because whether we carry our luggage on our head, or put it on the seat beside us or up on the luggage rack, the train is going to carry it to its destination. So just like someone traveling in a train can put their luggage aside and travel comfortably without any care, knowing that the train is going to take them to their destination, likewise we should live our life. We should set all our cares and concerns aside, leave them all to the care of Bhagavan, and we should relax and live our life happily. But we can live our life happily only by being free from desires, attachments, likes, dislikes, and so on. So long as we have desires and attachments, we will be constantly concerned about what's going to happen next, and we cannot live our life in the happy, carefree way that Bhagavan asked us to live our life. To be truly carefree is possible only to the extent to which we surrender ourselves. That's not just a superficial being carefree in a superficial way, in a deep way, in a way where we're in a state of undisturbed equanimity. That is possible only through surrender. So this present coronavirus crisis or pandemic or whatever we call it, this is actually, if we use it properly, it is a very beneficial for our spiritual progress. Does that in any way answer your question, Alistair?
Well, yes, it does to a point, and it answers it very well to a point. The only thing is, you talked about injustice amongst peoples as being an example of the way we're not behaving properly. You didn't say anything about animals. I mean, it seems.
Oh, that is also true. I mean, we treat each other badly, and we treat animals even worse.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the fact that this started we're told that this started in Wuhan, when some people were eating bats. They eat anything, apparently, all kinds of animals in some parts of the world. And apparently, the bats transmitted the virus to the humans who ate them. Mm. And I think that's significant, because it's sort of, maybe the animals are getting their back on us in some way, but it's more than that. I mean, it's significant that this thing has come to us through animals. I think that is significant. And the way we're treating animals also encompasses the way that we're treating the whole of nature. I mean, we treat each other badly, we treat animals badly, we treat the whole of nature badly. We can't go on like this.
What you say is true, but this is all, these are all things we can interpret these things in this way, but this is it's good that people think like this, like you're thinking, but this isn't very deep. There's a much deeper way of responding to this, which is what I said, how it's applicable to the path of surrender, which for those of us who are trying to follow Bhagavan's path, hopefully if we were meat eaters, we've long ago given up that, if we're truly following Bhagavan's path. And we should also be trying to live a life of ahimsa, of causing minimum harm, which means having the minimum ecological carbon footprint or whatever. All these things are obviously necessary, but these are more superficial. We need to go much deeper when we're following Bhagavan's path. Merely giving up bad outer habits is not sufficient. We need to give up our bad inner habits. And the origin of all our habits is our rising as ego. That is the root, and that's what Bhagavan says we need to deal with.
Yes.
And that can be dealt with effectively only by the path of self-surrender and self-investigation.
That's very good, Michael. Thank you very much.
So the next person with hand up is Prashant.
Oh, you were telling me about, or telling us about the reincarnation and the how Bhagavan interpreted the reincarnation for us, and how to get out of the loop of births and deaths.
Yes.
If you could just expand on his teaching, that would be great for all of us. Thank you.
Now we seem to have been born because we experience ourselves as I am this body. That awareness, I am this body, is a false self-awareness. It's not an awareness of ourselves as we actually are, but an awareness of ourselves as something other than what we actually are. So this is ego. It is as ego, we're always aware of ourselves as I am this body. So this is the root problem. In order to overcome this problem, because this is a false self-awareness, an awareness of ourselves as something other than what we actually are, we can overcome it only by being aware of ourselves as we actually are. That's why in that first verse that I referred to, Bhagavan says, Tanne marandu, forgetting oneself, tanuve tanaha eni, considering a body alone to be oneself, enil piravi edutu, taking innumerable births. After all that, then he says, irudi tanne unundu, that finally knowing oneself. Knowing oneself here means knowing ourselves as we actually are, being aware of ourselves as we actually are. Tanne unundu, tanagal, literally means becoming oneself or being as we actually are. Ulahu sanchara kanavil biritale, that it is only waking up from a dream of wandering all over the world. So according to Bhagavan, all these innumerable births we take, why do we take innumerable births? First, we forget what we actually are. That is, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. As a result of that, we consider a body to be ourselves. As a result of that, we take innumerable births, because every birth is just a dream. And in every dream we take we project a dream. Whenever we dream, we experience ourselves as a body in the dream world. That it is through the five senses of a dream body that we project a dream world. And according to Bhagavan, any state in which we are embodied, any state in which we are aware of phenomena, is just a dream. So the way to wake up from this dream is to know our real nature and therefore be as we actually are. So how to know what we actually are? We need to investigate ourselves. Because if you want to, for example, if you want to see the sun, what you have to do, you have to turn and look at it. Likewise, if you want to see what we actually are, we need to turn back and look at ourselves. Look at doesn't mean literally look at, but metaphorically, we need to attend to ourselves keenly to see what we actually are. Does that answer your question, or is there anything more you want to ask?
Yeah, the book which.
Yeah, probably one more thing which you could comment on this, the book, the Bhagavad Gita book. Would you have a title for us to check that out? Which you earlier referred to, was commented by Bhagavan.
Mm-hmm. Yes. As I said, what I said earlier is that Bhagavan selected 42 verses from the Bhagavad Gita and he translated them into Tamil. And in two of those verses, in the original, it's verses 25 and 26 of chapter 6. But Krishna very clearly describes the practice of self-investigation. According to Bhagavan's translation, what it means is, in the first verse, he says, this is verse 27 of Bhagavad Gita Saram, which is a translation of verse 25 of chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita. It is necessary by a courage-imbued intellect to gently, the words Bhagavan used in Tamil are mella mella. The original is sane sane. I mean, gently, calmly, gradually, make the mind achieve motionlessness. Great charioteer, fix the mind, your attention on Atma, yourself. Do not think of even the slightest of anything else at all. Atma samstam manakritva, I can't remember exactly how it is in Sanskrit. Now, kinchitabi chintayet, something like that. Do not think of anything at all. In Tamil, Bhagavan says, Chittate anma vil se tiduka, matru eduvum ittanayum enidade. Do not think even in the slightest of anything else. That's a very clear and beautiful description of the practice of self-investigation. And then Krishna continues in the next verse, whatever the mind, which is always wavering about without any steadiness, grasp, and wherever it consequently wanders, drawing that mind back from that and fixing it in or on Atma, oneself, make it always steady. So the nature of our mind to be constantly going outwards, but however many times it goes outward, wherever it goes, we have to slowly, gradually draw it back and try and keep it fixed on ourselves. So in these two verses, Krishna has very beautifully described the practice of self-investigation. But Gita, as I replied to someone else during the break, Gita is a text that has something for everyone. So from the very highest teachings like these, there are all sorts of teachings about karma yoga and about Arjuna was a kshatriya, he belonged to a royal family, who belonged to a warrior caste. So it was his dharma, his duty, to fight a righteous war. So there is even instruction for living a righteous life, even if you happen to be a warrior. So the teachings, so many different teachings, but if we want to know the ultimate truth, the way to know it is revealed in these two verses.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael Baba. Thank you so much, Pranam.
All thanks to Bhagavan.
I had a question which is kind of a little off from the text, but it is connected also.
Yeah.
In the text of the 5th verse, Bhagavan uses the word vastu.
Yes.
I have seen this word used to represent the limitations of the projection of what the ego makes as projection. And in Vedanta, it is referred to as limitation of desha, kala, and vastu. So how is that aspect of limitation, and how is the aspect of vastu as substratum?
Okay.
How are they two connected?
Okay. But the word vastu has different meanings in different contexts. In some context, vastu can simply mean a thing, an object. So when it talks about the limitation of kala, desa, and vastu, I assume that means time, space, and phenomena and objects. They're all limited. So that's using vastu in a different sense. Vastu is also refers to the absolute ultimate substance, which is pure awareness. It's in that sense that Bhagavan uses it here.
Yeah, thank you.
So most words, we have to understand from the context, the sense in which they're used. So sometimes the same word is used in a very different sense in different contexts. Srikar?
Yes, hi Michael.
Hi.
First of all, thank you to Alistair and you, Michael, for letting me join. I really, truly appreciate it. I'm a bit hesitant to ask this question, but I'll still go on, I guess. A jnani, knowing the truth, or a self-realized jnani, how does he continue living in the world as if nothing happened? Or maybe, in other words, with the illusion gone, knowing himself as the screen, how can he be continued to be interested in the motion picture on the screen, because it does not make sense anymore?
Okay, this is a very good question. This is a point about which many people are quite understandably confused. The truth is that the problem is, because we see ourselves as a body, as a person, we see the jnani as a person. But the jnani is not a person. Like, for example, let's take Bhagavan. We see Bhagavan. There was a young boy called Venkataraman who had a fear of death. And according to the story that we read, he responded to that fear of death by turning his attention within, and he realized his real nature. And then it seems to us that he then, a few months later, he traveled to Tiruvannāmalai. He lived for 54 years in Tiruvannāmalai. He gave so many teachings. All that happened after that day when he was a 16-year-old boy in Madurai, that was the end of his story, truly speaking. And after that, once there was that ego that had experienced itself as I am Venkataraman had ceased to exist. What remained was only pure awareness. So Bhagavan is actually nothing other than pure awareness. It is said in some texts, the knower of Brahman becomes Brahman. That isn't literally true, because it's not a matter of becoming, but when we know what we actually are, we remain as we actually are. We don't actually become what we actually are, because we're always that. So the jnani is just pure awareness. But because we see ourselves, because we mistake ourselves to be a body, we mistake the jnani to be a body. And then we say, oh, how does Bhagavan, if Bhagavan's in the state of pure self-awareness, how he's answering the questions, how he's behaving like ordinary people. Bhagavan said, all this is only in the view of the onlooker, only in the view of the ajnani. The jnani seems to be a person. But the truth is, the jnani is not a person. The jnani is just pure awareness. So Bhagavan says in verse, in uḷḷadu, Bhagavan says in verse 31 of uḷḷadu, in this verse, Bhagavan uses, in Tamil, the plural form is sometimes used in an honorific sense. So though Bhagavan refers to the jnani here in the plural, it's actually referring, it doesn't mean that there are many jnanis, there is only one jnani. But Bhagavan often used to say, the jnana alone is the jnani. That is pure awareness, alone is what is aware of itself. So what Bhagavan says in this verse is, Tannai aritu erunda tanmaya nandaku. That means for those who are happiness composed of that which rose destroying themselves. That means for those who are just, tanmayananda means happiness, literally means happiness composed of that. That means Brahman. So for those who are that happiness which is Brahman, how do they become that happiness composed of that is the nature of Brahman? By destroying themselves, by destroying ego. So for them, what one thing exists for doing, they do not know anything other than themselves. Like he says, tanne uḻḷadu anyam ondrum ariyabi. Do not know anything other than themselves. That means they, but why? Because vijnāni is just pure awareness. And in the view of pure awareness means awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. So in the view of vijnāni, there is nothing other than himself to know. And then he concludes, Ava nileme innadu indru unnul evan. Who can conceive their state as like this? So we can, so long as we mistake ourselves to be a person, so long as we raise as ego and consequently experience ourselves as I am this body, we cannot conceive the state of vijnāni who is not aware of anything other than itself. Does that help to clarify at all what you were asking?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does. Thank you so much.
Right.
My question is in terms of reconciling the experience of being in the dream world. There is a kind of push and pull experience of the Bhagavan's teaching to us is for us to look inwards to investigate ourselves.
Yeah.
But then you have this it's sort of a necessity in the dream world with regards to our participation for us to go outwards. And so there is that necessity and the need for us to conform in that dream world. So how do you reconcile this? So because what I'm seeing in my experience is when I'm practicing the inward investigation, everything is perfect, everything is all right. I'm happy, I'm joyful, and yeah. But when I have to live in the dream world, which I'm aware of what is going on, I know that is, I'm the pure awareness and all of this is a dream. There's a level of truth that I'm aware of. And I still need to, I go to work. I have to abide by the rules and the laws and the social norms and all of that. So the mind is a necessity for the mind to go outwards. So how do you reconcile both of this?
Right. The issue here is doership. Because we experience ourselves as this body of mind, whatever actions are done by the body of mind seem to be actions done by us. So the only way to overcome this is to know ourselves as we actually are. That's why we investigate ourselves. That's why we're trying to surrender ourselves. In the early stages of practice, it seems to us that we need to attend to, we need to go to work, we need to do whatever is necessary to earn a living, to support ourselves and our family. We have so many obligations, it seems to us at first. But as we progress deeper and deeper in this path, as we slowly learn to separate ourselves from this body, from this identification with the body and mind, okay, we still experience this body and mind as I, but we're able to see the, we're slowly, the more we investigate ourselves, the more clearly we can see we are actually something distinct from this body and mind. And so we are able to gradually dissociate ourselves from the actions that this body and mind have to do. According to Bhagavan, whatever actions are necessary in order for us to experience our prarabdha, our body and mind will be made to do those actions. We cannot do anything to prevent that. So, but the problem is, while doing those actions which are necessary to experience our prarabdha, our destiny, our will is also interfering. When we experience nice things, we want more of it. When we experience unpleasant things, we want to avoid it. So we are constantly acting, our mind, speech, and body are being driven by two forces. Firstly, by our destiny, because there's certain, in order to experience our destiny, there are certain actions we have to do. If it's your destiny to continue receiving your salary every month, you have to continue going to work every day and doing whatever is necessary. You means not you, but the body and mind have to continue. So your body and mind will be made to do those actions. But at the same time, our will is also interfering. So our mind, speech, and body are being driven both by destiny and by our will. We cannot change those actions which we are destined to do, which the body, speech, and mind are destined to do. What we can do is refrain from acting according to our will. But how do we do so? It's not by restraining our actions, but by restraining our will. If we have no likes and dislikes, we won't do any actions driven by our likes and dislikes. If we have no desires and attachments, our actions won't be driven by our desires and attachments. So it's at the level of our will that we need to deal with this problem. But so long as we rise as ego, we will inevitably, to a greater or lesser extent, have likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and so on. We cannot be completely free of these things so long as we rise as ego, because attachment is the very nature of ego. As Bhagavan said in that verse that I quoted earlier, verse 25 of uḷḷadu, as ego, we come into existence grasping form, we come into existence, we stand grasping form, and we flourish by grasping and feeding on form. The term he uses in Tamil for grasping is patri. The noun form of patri is patru, which means attachment. So attachment, what Bhagavan implies in that verse is attachment is the very nature of ego. We can lessen the strength of our attachments, but we cannot completely be free of attachments so long as we continue to rise as ego. So it's only by cutting up ego is the root, only by cutting up this root, by getting rid of, by eradicating ego, can we be totally free of likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and so on. That's why Bhagavan focuses his entire teachings on ego and on how to get rid of ego. So it is, so if we are following this path of self-investigation and self-surrender, slowly, the strength of our desires and attachments will be becoming less strong. They'll be weakening. To the extent that we weaken our desires and attachments, to that extent we'll become more clearly aware of the distinction between ourself, the observer, and the body and mind, which are things observed by us. The more we are thereby separate ourselves, it's not a complete separation I'm talking about, I'm still talking about the practice, so it's only a partial separation, but to the extent that we separate ourselves, to that extent we will not feel the doership for the actions that the body, speech, and mind are doing. Bhagavan says in the 13th paragraph of Nana, the one I was referring to earlier, where he says, he begins by saying, not giving even the slightest room to the rising of any thought other than self-attentiveness is alone giving oneself to God. He then goes on to say, even though one places whatever amount of burden upon God, that entire amount he will bear. Since one Parameshwara Shakti means supreme ruling power or power of God, is driving all karyas. That means whatever needs to be done or ought to be done or to happen, since that one Parameshwara Shakti is driving all karyas, instead of we also yielding to it, why to be perpetually thinking it's necessary to do like this, it's necessary to do like that? Then he gives the analogy in the final sentence, though we know that the train is carrying all the burdens, why should we who go traveling in it, instead of remaining happily leaving our small luggage placed on the train, suffer bearing our luggage on our head? So if the more the deeper we go in this path of self-investigation and self-surrender, the more we will recognize that actually we don't have to do anything. Because whatever is necessary to be done for the maintenance of this body and the family of this body and everything, we'll be made, the body, speech, and mind will be made to do these things. But since this body, speech, since we are separating ourselves from this body, speech, or mind, we will not be affected by that. Well, I'm not saying entirely, we will be affected by it less. So we'll be slowly separating ourselves from the body, speech, and mind, which are doing whatever actions are necessary according to whatever actions they are driven to do according to prarabdha. Does that at all answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Right. Michael's iPad.
Yeah, this is to follow on from the question before last. I get it that if you realize the self, you've transcended everything, so you've transcended your ego totally. But I find it sort of a rather curious thing that Bhagavan sometimes expressed emotional responses and even sort of reflecting on his own experience or his state of self-realization. I even heard that when he first, a little after he first realized the self, somebody said that he had he wondered if he was suffering some kind of disease, and that if that was the case, then that was really a nice disease to have, you know, sort of. And then later on, there are cases where he, you know, when he went to the temple initially, he was greatly awe-inspired by the saints that were depicted in the temple, and there was a case when he went into town begging for food, and he said, you know, that he felt like a king. You know, he felt, you know, almost like a great status to sort of go around with this. So it seems a little bit like there's a sort of contradiction here with the idea that he has completely transcended his normal psychology as a normal human being. It seems that he's expressing, you know, sort of almost normal emotional responses. And I just wondered how one could kind of reconcile those two things.
Okay, there are a few points. When he went to the temple in Madurai and sat before the idols of the 63 saints and was weeping, praying for such devotion, that was before the death experience.
Oh, right, yeah.
After he read Periya Puranam, which may have been a year or so before that death experience, it was at that time. That's one. Okay. Another thing is a lot of the accounts about Bhagavan's death experience, about people misinterpreted what Bhagavan said. For example, Bhagavan said, sometimes it seems Bhagavan said, it was like an a-v-vattuvai. A-v-vattuvai means a possession. But Bhagavan was talking metaphorically when he said that, but people took it very literally, and they added a lot that it was like, because everyone understands, when Bhagavan says something, people understand it at their own level. So there's this thing about a-v-vattuvai, this simple word Bhagavan used, saying it was like an a-v-vattuvai. People have taken that far too literally. And they've even, as if Bhagavan had elaborated upon that. I think that a lot of that is people have elaborated in their imagination on what Bhagavan meant when he said like an a-v-vattuvai. That is one thing. And also about when he said about, but when he was going begging, he felt like an emperor. Everything Bhagavan said, he said in a particular context. So I think, I don't know exactly what context he said that, but I suspect he was saying that about how, I mean, he may have been saying that to some sadhus, about how it's going begging for food is not a shameful thing. It's because you're not going to, if a sadhu is going begging in the correct spirit, they're not going begging people. They're just going looking to see where God has kept food for them. So it is a state of complete dependence on divine grace. One day, sometimes if you're a sadhu begging food, some days you may get no food, some days you may get stale food, some days you may be given a feast. Whatever it is, you accept it with equanimity, and that is what God has given you that day. So it's in that sense Bhagavan would have said that. So, and Bhagavan responded emotionally in other ways. Sometimes when people came to Bhagavan and told about calamities in their life, Bhagavan would shed tears. Because Bhagavan said it sometime, but the jnani is like a mirror. Whatever comes before it, it reflects that. So sometimes Bhagavan got angry with people when that was the appropriate thing to do. Sometimes he wept when that was the appropriate thing to do. But it's all, Bhagavan, just like a mirror, if you look in a mirror, you can smile at yourself, you can weep to yourself. The mirror is unaffected by whatever expressions you make. Likewise, Bhagavan, what Bhagavan actually is unaffected by all these things. But outwardly, the person he seems to be is a mirror. This is one reason why people understand Bhagavan in so many different ways. But everyone sees Bhagavan through their own colored glasses. So some people will say Bhagavan is red, some people will say Bhagavan is yellow, some people will say Bhagavan is blue. Because being unaware of the color of their own glasses, they don't know the real color of Bhagavan. Of course, I'm using an analogy here, but they don't literally say Bhagavan. But I mean, if you talk to people, I mean, there aren't so many of them left nowadays, but when I first was in Tiruvannamalai, there were still so many devotees, some of whom had lived with Bhagavan for 30, 40 years. And everyone had their own view about Bhagavan. And sometimes if you hear a story from one, and you want to check up on the details and you ask someone else, they say, oh, no, that isn't what Bhagavan said. Bhagavan did this. They have completely different interpretations of the same incidents. Because everyone sees Bhagavan through their own colored glasses. If we want to understand Bhagavan correctly, we need to remove our colored glasses. The colored glasses is ego. Only when we have eradicated ego can we know Bhagavan as he actually is. So long as we see Bhagavan as a person, we are seeing an appearance. We are not seeing the real Bhagavan. But even through that appearance, the love and compassion that is the real nature of Bhagavan shone, and the clarity of pure knowledge shone through him so brightly. So we, as Bhagavan said, who can understand his state? It's beyond our comprehension. If we want to comprehend, we have to surrender ourselves completely. We have to be swallowed by him. In one verse in uḷḷadu, he said, uḷḷadu kan, that means becoming food is seeing. So only when we are swallowed by him will we really know will we know his real nature. That's verse 21. Of uḷḷadu, he ends by saying, uḷḷadu kan, becoming food is seeing. So no one has seen Bhagavan unless they've been swallowed by him completely. And then there's no one remaining to say he's like this or he's like that. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, so I guess Bhagavan provides something for whatever level you're on. So
yes.
You know, you can start with seeing him as a sort of really, really nice person who has certain emotional reactions, but it's always taking you in or taking you to a higher state. So, you know, so the whole thing is a teaching, really, isn't it? So
yes.
If he is apparently expressing an emotional response, it's part of his teaching rather than, you know, a statement that that is actually his state.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
I had another little question. I don't know.
Certainly.
Okay. This. The silence we were talking about. You were talking about the silence, that the self is ultimate silence beyond the perspective of the ego's perspective, or what that silence might be. But actually, from this ego perspective, the idea of silence, you know, it sounds great, but actually it doesn't sound very interesting. You know, in a way, it sounds like a void. You know, like absolutely nothing happening.
Yeah.
You know, which is a lot better than a lot of things you could imagine. But he also, I remember, he also said it's the self is a continuous activity without a break, which is like very different from a different concept to the idea of silence, you know. And he did say that it's not a void, didn't he? So I just wonder if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
I'm not
that
sure.
it's a silence that's not a void, and it's a state of continuous activity without a break.
I'm not sure in what context he said continuous activity. I don't think that it literally means that, because its nature is just being, not doing. But that Bhagavan said many times.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
in some context, he may. I think sometimes he talked about dynamic stillness.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was in particular context, but he said that. So if
Yeah.
it's difficult to interpret these things out of the context.
Yeah. For me, if I could just say, for me, it implies total 100% aliveness. You know,
Yes.
this.
Yes.
So it's a totally alive reality,
yes,
and not like just a void where nothing's happening.
No. Well,
yeah.
Its nature is best described by 3 words: Sat, Chit, Ananda. It is what is, Sat. It is awareness, Chit. And it is infinite happiness, infinite satisfaction. So it is. That's why Bhagavan said this is not a void. It is the fullness of Satchidananda. But again, we cannot comprehend this. I mean, Satchidananda, the word means something to us, but we cannot comprehend the real meaning of Satchidananda until we lose ourselves in that, until we are swallowed by that. Silence, you say about it sounds rather uninteresting. This is the problem. The nature of as ego, we are always looking for something new, something interesting, something that captures our interest. And that is where the problem lies. Until we give up all our desires and attachments, until we cease to be interested in anything visesha. Visesha means anything special, anything different, until we are satisfied with just being what is, we won't be willing to surrender ego. It's only when Bhagavan sometimes used to say, when people ask Bhagavan, though we hear your teaching, still, why are our minds still going outward? Bhagavan said, because you haven't had enough of it yet. So we still find this world interesting, with all its news, all its wars and coronaviruses and all these things. That still captures our interest. Though it's a very unpleasant world, we still are fascinated by it. Until we give up our fascination with this world, until we are ready to be satisfied just with a state of mere being, a state like sleep, until we are satisfied to sleep eternally, we won't be willing to surrender ourselves. Only when we finally become tired of all this endless dreaming will we be ready to surrender ourselves completely and remain in the state of eternal sleep, which is infinite silence and infinite happiness and infinite love and infinite awareness. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, thank you. Yes.
So as always, the problem lies not with that, but with ourself as ego. Only when we get rid of ego will all these problems be solved.
It was really with the coronavirus, we have these death tolls every day.
Yes.
And we're all starting to at least know someone who's died. Could you go through what Bhagavan actually says about the process of death?
Bhagavan said we never experience our own death. Death is just like the ending of a dream. A dream can end in one of two ways. Either we go into another dream, or which includes waking up, because what we now take to be the waking state is just another dream, or we go into sleep. So when this body dies, well, it dies in the view of other people. We are only aware of this body so long as the body is still alive. Once the body has died, this dream has come to an end. So we will either find ourselves in some other dream, or we will be for a while in sleep before we start some other dream. But what is difficult what can be difficult about death is not death itself. It's the process of dying. It's death is a problem only for those who are living. Once we're dead, the problem is over. So it's dying because we are attached to the body. I don't know if you've ever seen someone when dying, people will generally, they will be gasping for breath. You can see that the ego is still trying to hold on to that body.
Yeah, but the people in the hospitals have said they've seen this in the beds opposite them.
Yes, yes, yes.
There's this gasping.
Yeah. I mean, that happened not just in the case of this coronavirus, in any natural death. Towards the end, people generally go through actually very different patterns of breathing they go through. But that's the sign the ego is still trying to hold on to the body. I'm willing to let go. But once we're dead, then the problem is over. But then another dream begins and it all starts all over again. So until ego is dead, the problem continues.
And of course, these teachings are helpful to us, but for the rest of the world,
yes,
it must be very, very difficult.
It is very difficult. I mean, even if we haven't gone very far in our practice of Bhagavan's teachings, if we've merely understood Bhagavan's teachings, it is such a burden off our chest, so to speak. That is, we can't really understand Bhagavan's teachings without, at least to a certain extent, surrendering ourselves, without to a certain extent reconciling ourselves to the fact of, but the nature of life is such. Things happen, pleasant things happen, unpleasant things happen, life happens, death happens, all these things is all part of life. And to the extent that we've understood Bhagavan's teachings correctly, to that extent we can face all these things with equanimity. So merely, I say merely understand. Merely, it's not. I mean, it's not a small thing to understand Bhagavan's teaching, because many people, the reason most people are not able to understand Bhagavan's teachings is not that Bhagavan's teachings are difficult. Bhagavan's teachings actually are extremely simple. The difficulty in understanding Bhagavan's teachings arises from our unwillingness to accept the absolute simplicity of them. But to the extent that we are willing to accept his teachings, to that extent, our life is so much easier. And so surrender is almost, I mean, I'm not saying any of us have surrendered perfectly, but at least a partial surrender is almost built into us by merely understanding, by merely accepting Bhagavan's teachings. That puts us in a surrender frame of mind. And so it's so much easier for us to face these problems. And these problems, to us, this coronavirus is a very big thing, because very few people alive nowadays have ever experienced anything like this. But in the past, these things happened so frequently. When Bhagavan was young, I think there was a cholera outbreak in South India when he was young, and then during his stay in Tiruvannamala, there were several epidemics. The worst one was a plague epidemic, where the whole of Tiruvannamala had to be vacated. And it was only with special permission of Bhagavan and a few sadhus were able to remain, but not in the town, or not even in Virupaksha. They had to stay outside the town limits in Padacchēdam on the northeast side of Arunachala. So these things in the past, they were far more common and we've been lulled into a false sense of security. And we've been thinking, oh, because of modern medicine, these things won't happen nowadays. But of course, modern medicine may help in certain ways, but it's no guarantee against these things.
Well, no, this is
things will
totally new, isn't it?
Things will always happen. It's just for us, it's particularly shocking because we've never lived through anything like this before.
No.
I think, Michael, of course, during the war, people were living with imminent death every night.
Yeah. If you
70 years ago.
If you lived in London, you had bombs falling every night. Or many other cities of Europe were similar.
I would definitely say that his teachings are an absolute help during these times.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
During good times and bad, his teachings are a help.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, we cannot, often I think, I cannot imagine how my life would be if Bhagavan and his teachings had not come into my life. It's inconceivable, because it's brought about such a complete change of attitude, which I can't imagine how I would have been without Bhagavan's teachings.
Very, very, very busy mind.
Yes.
Tortured, busy mind, I think.
Yes,
I would call
yes.
it, yeah.
Well, the mind is still busy, but it's less tortured because of his teachings.
Thank you.
Yes. And iPad 3, you wanted to ask something again? Sorry, I don't know your name, Sarah.
Sorry, my name is Solomon.
Solomon, okay.
Yes. The other question I was just related with regards to letting go of the ego. In Bhagavan's story, I think when he said the sun that rose in Madurai, is that?
Yes.
It's the same sun that didn't set. And so my question is with regards to our realization of our true self and letting go of the ego.
Yes.
Is this something that, because I think I've heard you in one of the YouTube videos mention something with regards to light, that once light comes, darkness, won't be there.
Yes.
So is this something in terms of our realization like Bhagavan had that one-time experience of, you know, getting to know the truth of who he is.
Yeah.
Is it something we experience one time, or is it something that even if we know the truth, because I've heard people say once you know the truth, you can't unknow the truth. So is it something, do we still continue to a higher level of truth, or are we going to have different kinds of grace that would lead us to various kinds of experiences? Some may be similar to that of Bhagavan, and for others it may be a gradual process, or, you know.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's my question.
Okay.
If it makes sense.
There is only one truth, and you are that. So either you know yourself as you actually are, or you don't know yourself as you actually are. Once we know ourselves as we actually are, that is a state of infinite, eternal, indivisible, immutable, pure awareness and happiness. That cannot change. It is not even that we achieve that at one stage and never lose it. Once ego is eradicated, we will see, but that is our eternal state. But we have never been anything other than that. So it is eternal. It has no beginning and no end. Bhagavan said, if it had a beginning, it would certainly have an end, but it has no beginning. It's only from the perspective of ego, but it seems, oh, one day I'm going to realize myself. That will be the beginning of my self-realization. But when we realize ourselves, we realize that there was never any ego, there was never any ignorance, but what we call self-realization, that's pure self-awareness, that alone is real, that alone exists eternally. So there's no going back.
Okay. Thank you.
That's why Bhagavan said that the real state is beyond bondage and liberation. That is, the true state of liberation is beyond bondage and liberation, because liberation has a meaning only if there is bondage. But when we know our real nature, we will know that we were never bound, but we are eternally liberated. So that is the state beyond that duality of bondage and liberation. Beyond the duality of ignorance and knowledge. Beyond all dualities. It's immutable, it never changes.
So I guess what it means is one, we have an awareness of who we are.
Yes.
We hold on to it. Can I phrase it like that?
You cannot let go of
hold
it.
on to,
you don't
cannot.
have to hold on to it, because you are that. You are that. There's no holding on. There are no two things, one to hold on to the other. You are that as you are always that. Even now you are that. But in order to see that you are that, you need to look at yourself. Once you look at yourself and see you are that, you will see you are always that and never anything else.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, right.
Thanks.
Metchild. Sorry, I don't know quite how you pronounce your name.
Yeah, you pronounce it perfectly.
Okay.
Thank you for your beautiful and inspiring words, Michael. A quick question on the how-to of surrender. To me, surrender seems a bit like doing nothing. And quite honestly, I think I have probably an attachment to doing nothing. Like, if I really didn't have to do anything, I'd be quite content lying on my bed, perhaps surfing the internet occasionally, reading a good book, and that I find that quite nice. But I have to do lots of things every day, and my experience is that I really actually have to force myself to do them. and they really seem to be completely necessary. So trying to make what you said really practical, I wonder whether what you're saying about surrender is the way to do that, to just constantly churn the idea in one's mind, like, you know, this is back one's will, or, you know, let go for back one's will, or something like that, to kind of find a middle way.
Well, firstly, we are not able to do nothing. Even when you're lying on your bed, you're not doing nothing. You're lying on your bed. So long as you identify yourself with body or mind, whatever state the body or mind are in, you have doership on that. I am lying, I am thinking nothing. It's all the doership is there. So the only way to do nothing is to cease rising as ego, and thereby cease identifying ourselves with body and mind. That's the first thing. Secondly, there are different, you can say different stages of surrender, not exactly in stages in the sense of steps, but there are different degrees of surrender, let's say. Surrender begins on the path of devotion. Because we have love for God, we want to surrender ourselves to God. We want to accept whatever happens as God's will and everything. So reminding ourselves, this is all Bhagavan's will, this is all, whatever is happening for my good. These are all, reflecting in this way is an aid to surrender. But actual surrender means letting go. The extent to which we let go of everything, to that extent are we truly surrendered. As we go, we can let go of other things only to a certain extent, because the very nature of ourself as ego is grasping. So we're always grasping something or other. So if we want to let go completely, we need to let go of ego. In other words, we need to free ourselves from ego. So ultimately, the how-to of surrender is turn within and investigate yourself. It's only by being self-attentive that we can let go of everything else. And by being self-attentive, we not only let go of everything else, we also let go of ego. So ultimately, surrender can be complete only by means of self-investigation. Until we've gone deep enough in our path of self-investigation, yes, accepting everything as Bhagavan's will, learning not to be perturbed by either the joys or sorrows of life, remaining inwardly calm. All these things are these are all part of surrender. But surrender is not something that you can. There's not really a how-to apart from self-investigation. There's no other how-to of surrender. There are aids to surrender, such as reflecting in certain ways, like whatever is happening according to Bhagavan's will and is there for my good. These sort of reflecting in this way can help us in our surrender. But the actual surrender means letting go. How to let go? Is there a method to let go? No, there isn't. Because every method involves something. Letting go of all methods, letting go of everything is surrender. And so long as we attend to anything other than ourselves, we are grasping that thing. So if we want to let go of everything, we need to cease grasping anything else and try to grasp only ourselves. To the extent that we grasp ourselves, to that extent do we let go of our holds on other things and ego subsides. Does that at all answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much. That's inspiring and practical at the same time.
If we could surrender just by lying on our bed all day long, then surrender would be very easy. But that is not surrender. That's called laziness, which is a problem we all have.
My question is the ego aware of anything?
Yes.
Because I have heard you say that Bhagavan's teaching is that that the problem that we have of identifying and believing the world is real, that we're real, it's because it's the ego that that feels this or believes this.
Yes.
I kind of struggle with that, because I sort of feel that the ego is really insentient, totally. It's sort of, it's just a kind of a structure in my own mind,
no.
which I'm identified with. And then when
you say I,
yeah,
I is ego.
Right. Yeah.
Ego
Yeah.
is not a structure. Ego is that ego is the observer, the witness, the perceiver. That which is aware of all other things is ego.
Well, it can't be, can it? Because it's unreal. It can't be aware. It's like the snake can't know that it's a rope because it's not real. So
Yes.
so surely on the deepest possible level, if you like,
but ego,
the ego is only borrowing awareness, isn't it?
Yes, true. Ego is borrowing awareness, but ego is what is actually aware. Real awareness is only satchit, which is our fundamental awareness of our own existence. I am. But when we the body is insentient. Body, mind, intellect, will, all are insentient. Ego is neither satchit, nor is it these insentient adjuncts, but it rises between the two, metaphorically speaking, and grasps the nature of both as itself. So ego is aware, but it's not aware of itself as it actually is. It's aware, as ego, we're always aware of ourself as a form, and we're aware of other things. So that which is now aware, ego is the subject, the perceiver, as I said, the witness. So that which is aware of all other things, that is ego. But as ego, we always identify ourselves with a particular body and mind.
Yeah, right. So it's not the actual, it's not like the self-image that one has in the mind.
No.
I have a sense of my story and everything.
It is that which is aware of all images, including the self-image.
Including the self-image.
Yes.
Yes, I really struggle with that.
That's why Bhagavan described ego as chit, jada, granti. Granti means not. Chit means what is aware. Jada means what is not aware. Ego is neither what is really aware, nor is it what is not aware. It is some spurious entity, but is aware, but is aware of itself not as it actually is, but as adjuncts, that is body, speech, and body, mind, and so on, which are all insentient.
Yeah.
With all the five sheaths, the body, life, mind, intellect, and will, these are all insentient, jada. Ego is not any of these things, but it takes all these things as itself. So ego it's, as Bhagavan said, it's a formless phantom. When he said it's a formless phantom, when he says it's formless, he means it's got no form of its own, even though it never exists without grasping a form as itself, the form of these five sheaths as itself. When he says it's formless, he means it had, sorry, when he says it's a phantom, he means it's got no substance. The substance is the real awareness, but it borrows the awareness from our real nature, and it borrows the form from these five sheaths, but it's not actually either of them. It's, if you separate them, it's like separating a knot. A knot exists only when two pieces of string are entangled. When you separate those two pieces of string, where is the knot? So it has no independent existence.
Yeah, and get well soon. Take care of yourself.
Bhagavan is taking care of all of us. The best way to take care of ourselves is to leave everything to Bhagavan.
Bhagavan has said Bhagavan has said God, self, and Guru is one.
Yeah.
So,
The best surrender, the best insurance policy is complete surrender.